Hi, my name is Linnea Sherber, and this is a wrap-up of highlights of learning, development, and motivation from my Edfd 400 class. So to start off, I'll be discussing some learning theories. I'll be covering behaviorism, constructivism, and cognitive science. So beginning with behaviorism, I discovered that learning needs to be something you can see, and that this theory was greatly studied by B.F. Skinner. And according to our Approaches to Teaching book, it was developed from the background of how animals learn in the nature of their instincts and how they were able to problem solve. So overall, it is just important to take away that you can't see what you cannot observe. And with behaviorism, I highlight the subject of operant conditioning. So with operant conditioning, we are conditioning our reflexes. So the subject involved must depend on a stimulus, which is then followed by a certain response, and which then results with an award. So this can be seen in Thorndike's Cat in a Box reference or B.F. Skinner's Skinner box. So how does behaviorism connect to motivation? We need to know that the motivation involved with behaviorism is extrinsic, which means that it is driven by rewards such as grades, money, or praise. So I know that many teachers today, and even when I was in grade school, can be seen using gold star systems to reward their students for either good behavior or performing certain tasks. So I wanted to connect this intrinsic motivation to the Bobby Fischer movie that we watched, where Josh is determined to receive a certificate, otherwise his reward, for being a master chess player.
Here's your certificate. Fill it out. Doesn't mean anything. It's a piece of paper. It's a Xerox of a piece of paper. Do you want another one?
So that is just one example. And then moving on to constructivism, I found out that learning is a social process between a more knowledgeable person and a less knowledgeable person. So to help me remember this key idea, I connected to the Bobby Fischer movie again, where Bruce is considered Josh's teacher, being a more knowledgeable person when it comes to the game of chess. Piaget approaches this function of thinking and learning in terms of the cognitive structures that make it possible. So how does motivation connect to constructivism? So I discovered it to be a desire to be like others in a social practice. So for example, I have two boys at recess, and one boy notices that the other is very talented at the game of basketball, doing impressive tricks and making baskets. And then the other young boy sees this and immediately has a desire to be skillful at basketball just like the other boy is. And then finally, with cognitive science, which is the computer metaphor of the mind, it focuses on how people take an info, recode and remember it, make decisions on it, and then finally turn it into their behavior. It is also important to understand that development is an exchange between nature and nurture, and that learning is overall a mental process. So, according to our book, I found out that this method actually seems to lack influence of interest and motivation and also emotion. But however, it can be based off sets of ideas about various situations. For example, if a student, or the computer in this case, is not very good at math, all they may need is just a different type of programming or a different method of teaching it. So the results of a student's capabilities can lead to them to either have a fixed mindset, so sticking to what they are good at and not really overstepping those boundaries, or a growth mindset, which they can create goals to better themselves even if they might result in failure. So, for example, in this case, I took the story of Rick Barry that we listened to in a podcast while we were in class. So Rick performed granny shots that resulted in scoring more points, even though the type of throw that he was making was not considered the norm, and this risked him his popularity from fans and his teammates. And then lastly, I'll discuss what I understood from the 5 stages of development, which were assessed by the 3 major theorists, Piaget, Erikson, and Vygotsky. So with the 5 stages, the first one is infancy to early childhood, and they work on onsets of language, their gender, and their ethnicity. And this kind of ties into early childhood to middle childhood as well. They're kind of doing the same thing. Here they're focusing more on aggression and what is appropriate social behavior. Continuing on to middle childhood to adolescence, they're working on their academic skills and their relationships with other children their age. Adolescence to adulthood, they're working on their more cognitive, spiritual, sexual, and moral development, just kind of figuring out who they are as a person. And then finally, the last stage, adulthood to old age, the person may review and reflect on his or her life and see how they think of who they were as a person. So overall, these are just kind of the wrap-up things that I highlighted from this class, and thank you so much for watching.